Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to open your door to strangers. James Morgan stood at the podium, his weathered hands gripping the edges as he looked out at the crowd of graduates. Behind him sat Elena, tears streaming down her face, and beside her, young Alexander in his tailored suit, now the youngest tech billionaire in America at just 17. 10 years ago, I was just a struggling carpenter raising my daughter alone in a small house with a leaky roof. I had no idea that the bruised woman and her quiet son standing on my porch in the rain would change everything, not because of the fortune that boy would eventually build, but because they taught me what family truly means. James paused, his voice breaking. If you're watching this and wondering if kindness still matters in this world, I'm here to tell you it's the only thing that ever has. If this story of unexpected family, resilience, and the true meaning of wealth resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring real-life stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Now, let's go back to where it all began, on that stormy night that would change 3 lives forever. The rain hammered against the windows of James Morgan's modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Portland. At 42, James had grown accustomed to the sound of Oregon downpours, finding comfort in their steady rhythm as he worked late into the night on furniture commissions in his garage workshop. His 14-year-old daughter, Lily, had gone to bed hours ago, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the half-finished oak dining table that was due to a client by the end of the week. The knock was so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's fury. 3 hesitant taps, then silence. James set down his sanding block and checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. Nobody came calling at this hour, especially not in this weather. He wiped sawdust from his hands and made his way through the kitchen to the front door, flicking on the porch light before pulling it open. What he saw made his breath catch. A woman stood there, soaked to the bone, her right eye swollen shut and a split lip still oozing blood. Behind her, partially hidden, was a boy no older than 7, his eyes wide with fear, clutching a battered backpack to his chest. The woman swayed slightly, as if standing took all her remaining strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "The shelter is full. The woman there gave me your address. Said you sometimes help people in trouble." She looked down, shame evident in her posture. "Just for tonight. Please." James didn't hesitate. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "Both of you." That night changed everything, though James wouldn't understand how profoundly for years to come. The woman's name was Elena Petrov, and her son was Alexander. As James helped clean Elena's wounds in his small bathroom, she shared fragments of their story between winces and stifled sobs. Her husband had died unexpectedly 2 years ago, leaving her and Alexander at the mercy of his wealthy, controlling parents. When Elena had refused their demands to send Alexander to a military boarding school, the situation had escalated from emotional abuse to physical violence. "They said I was poisoning him with weakness," Elena explained, her accent thickening with emotion. "That I was unfit. Tonight, my father-in-law." She gestured to her face, unable to finish the sentence. "We ran. Took nothing but Alex's backpack. They will look for us. They have connections, money. You're safe here," James assured her, though he wondered how he could possibly protect them from people with resources and influence. He was just a single dad, a carpenter with more month than money most of the time, raising his daughter in the house his late wife had left them. But looking at the terrified boy sitting silently at his kitchen table, James knew he couldn't turn them away. "Just until I find work," Elena promised. "I have degree in computer science from Moscow University. I can contribute." James made up the pull-out couch for Elena and set up a sleeping bag for Alexander in Lily's room after a whispered conversation with his sleepy but curious daughter. As he finally crawled into his own bed near 2 a.m., he had no idea that this impulsive act of kindness would set in motion events that would transform all their lives. The next morning, James woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet conversation. He found Elena in the kitchen, her injuries looking even more severe in the daylight, but she had managed to make breakfast with what little was in his refrigerator. Lily and Alexander sat at the table, the girl chattering away while the boy nodded occasionally, his eyes still wary but less frightened than the night before. "I hope this is okay," Elena said when she saw James. "I wanted to thank you." "More than okay," James replied, accepting a cup of coffee that tasted better than anything he usually managed to brew. "How are you feeling?" "I have had worse," she said simply, and the matter-of-fact way she said it made something in James's chest tighten. Over the next few days, a temporary arrangement began to feel more permanent. Elena insisted on helping around the house while James was at work, cleaning and cooking meals that stretched his modest grocery budget further than he thought possible. Alexander remained quiet, speaking only when directly addressed, but James noticed how the boy watched everything with intense focus, especially when James worked in his workshop. One evening, about a week after their arrival, James found Alexander standing in the doorway of the garage, observing as he measured and marked a piece of cherry wood. "Would you like to help?" James asked. Alexander hesitated, then nodded, approaching cautiously. James showed him how to hold the sandpaper, guiding his small hands over the wood grain. "Always go with the grain, not against it," he explained. "Wood has a natural direction, a flow to it. You have to respect that." "Like people," Alexander said, his first voluntary comment since arriving. James looked at the boy in surprise. "That's exactly right. Like people." A ghost of a smile crossed Alexander's face, and James felt something shift between them. That night, Alexander asked if he could help again tomorrow. Meanwhile, Lily had taken it upon herself to become Alexander's guide and protector at the elementary school they now both attended. Though 3 years older, she walked him to his classroom each morning and met him at lunch, making sure no one bothered the new kid with the strange accent and second-hand clothes. 2 weeks stretched into a month. Elena found part-time work at a local grocery store, insisting on contributing to household expenses despite James's protests. She also began applying for tech positions, though without recent experience or American references, doors remained closed. The bruises on her face faded, but James often caught her staring out windows, jumping at unexpected sounds, scanning parking lots before getting out of the car, the habits of someone who expected danger to find her again. The Petrovs' presence changed the Morgan household in subtle ways. Meals became communal events rather than the hurried affairs they had been when it was just James and Lily. Elena taught them Russian words and phrases, laughing gently at their mangled pronunciation. Alexander slowly emerged from his shell, especially in the workshop, where he displayed an uncanny aptitude for understanding how things fit together. One night, after the children were asleep, Elena and James sat on the porch with cups of tea, watching lightning flicker on the horizon. "My in-laws will not stop looking," Elena said quietly. "Victor's family has resources, connections. They believe Alexander is their legacy." "What do you mean?" James asked. Elena sighed. "Victor's family, the Petrovs, they own technology companies, real estate across Europe. Alexander is sole heir. They see him as investment, not child. Want to mold him into their image." She looked at James, her eyes haunted. "They will take him from me if they find us." "I won't let that happen," James said, the fierceness in his voice surprising even himself. Elena studied him for a long moment. "Why are you helping us, James? You know nothing about us." James thought about his late wife, Sarah, who had died of cancer 5 years earlier, leaving him to raise Lily alone. "Someone helped me once, when I needed it most," he said finally. "A neighbor who watched Lily when Sarah was in the hospital, who brought meals, who sat with me when I couldn't bear to be alone. You don't forget kindness like that." Elena reached across the space between them and placed her hand over his. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." As summer approached, their arrangement took on a sense of permanence neither had acknowledged aloud. James cleared space in his workshop for a small desk where Alexander could tinker with the old computer parts Elena had salvaged from various sources. The boy had shown an extraordinary aptitude for technology, taking apart and reassembling devices with intuitive understanding that amazed both adults. One evening, James returned home to find Elena staring at her laptop, her face pale. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down his toolbox. "They found us," she said, turning the screen toward him. It showed a legal notice. The Petrovs had filed for custody of Alexander, claiming Elena was mentally unstable and unfit to parent. Court date is next month. James felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "We'll fight this," he promised. "I know a lawyer, an old friend from high school. He owes me a favor." But both knew that favors and friendship would only go so far against the resources the Petrovs could bring to bear. That night, after Elena had gone to bed, James sat at the kitchen table calculating figures, trying to determine how much he could contribute to legal fees without falling behind on the mortgage. The numbers were discouraging. The next morning, Alexander approached James as he was leaving for work. "I can help," the boy said, his expression serious beyond his years. "Help how, buddy?" James asked, kneeling to eye level. Alexander hesitated, then said, "I have something from before. Something valuable." The boy led James to his backpack and carefully removed a false bottom James hadn't known existed. Inside was a small flash drive. "What's this?" James asked. "Papa gave it to me before he died," Alexander explained. "Said to keep it safe, that it was my future." He looked up at James, his eyes solemn. "Maybe it can help Mama now." James took the drive to Elena, who plugged it into her laptop with trembling hands. Her gasp brought James to her side. On the screen were detailed financial records, patents, code repositories, and a video file. Elena clicked on it, and Viktor Petrov's face filled the screen, looking tired but determined. "Alexander, if you are watching this, then I am gone, and you and your mother may be in danger," the recording began. "My parents never approved of my marriage to Elena. They see her as an outsider, unworthy of the Petrov name and fortune. I fear what they might do if something happens to me." Viktor explained that he had secretly transferred significant assets into trusts that would activate on Alexander's 18th birthday or earlier if certain conditions were met. He had also documented years of his parents' questionable business practices and tax evasion. "This is insurance," Viktor's recording continued. "Use it only if necessary, to protect yourself and your mother. Trust no one in my family." His voice softened. "I love you, my son. Be brave, be kind, and remember that true wealth is not measured in rubles or dollars." Elena was weeping openly by the time the video ended. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Viktor never told me." James studied the financial documents, whistling softly. "Elena, if these figures are accurate, Alexander isn't just wealthy, he's set to inherit a fortune that would make him a billionaire." "It doesn't matter," Elena said firmly. "Money is what makes his grandparents dangerous. I would trade every kopeck to keep him safe and happy." They decided to contact James's lawyer friend, Sam Reeves, showing him only enough of the documents to establish that the Petrovs had significant legal vulnerabilities without revealing Alexander's potential wealth. Sam agreed to represent Elena pro bono, seeing an opportunity to make a name for himself against a powerful international family. The weeks leading up to the court date were tense. Strange cars were spotted driving slowly past the house. Elena received threatening phone calls. James installed new locks and a security system he could barely afford. Through it all, they tried to maintain normalcy for the children, though both Alexander and Lily sensed the adults' anxiety. The custody hearing was scheduled for a sweltering day in July. James took the day off work to accompany Elena, leaving the children with his sister across town. The Petrovs arrived with an entourage of lawyers and assistants, Mikhail and Irina Petrov looking every bit the wealthy aristocrats in designer clothes that cost more than James's monthly mortgage. When they spotted Elena, Mikhail's face contorted with disgust. "You think you can hide our grandson from us?" he hissed in Russian. "He belongs with his true family, not with some American nobody." Elena straightened her spine, clutching the folder containing copies of Victor's documents. "Alexander is with his true family," she replied in English. "And we are prepared to show exactly what kind of people you are." The hearing began with the Petrovs' lawyers painting Elena as an opportunist who had married Victor for his money and was now an unstable, unfit mother. They presented affidavits from family doctors and staff attesting to Elena's supposed emotional outbursts and neglect of Alexander. When it was their turn, Sam methodically dismantled these claims, presenting school records showing Alexander's excellent adjustment and academic performance. James testified about the boy's character and his close relationship with his mother. But their strongest evidence came when Sam introduced financial records showing the Petrovs had been investigated for tax fraud in 3 countries and had a history of using their wealth to manipulate legal outcomes. "And how exactly did you come by these records, Mr. Reeves?" the judge asked, frowning. Sam nodded to Elena, who stood and explained about Victor's final gift to his son. "My husband knew his parents would try to take Alexander if something happened to him. He left evidence of their business practices as protection." The Petrovs' faces had gone pale. Their lead attorney requested a recess to confer with his clients. When court resumed an hour later, the Petrovs withdrew their petition for custody, though Mikhail's venomous glare at Elena promised this wasn't over. Outside the courthouse, Elena collapsed into James's arms, sobbing with relief. "It's over," she kept saying. "It's really over." But James wasn't so sure. People with that kind of wealth and vindictiveness rarely gave up so easily. "Let's go home," he said, keeping an arm around her shoulders. "The kids will be waiting." That evening, as they celebrated with pizza and ice cream, James noticed Alexander watching him with an intensity that seemed beyond his years. After Lily had gone upstairs to call a friend, the boy approached James on the porch. "Thank you for helping us," Alexander said formally. James ruffled his hair. "That's what family does, buddy." Alexander considered this. "Are we family now?" The question caught James off guard. Over the past months, he had come to think of Elena and Alexander as more than guests or friends, but he hadn't put a name to it. "I'd like us to be," he said carefully. "If that's what you and your mom want too." Alexander nodded solemnly. "I think Papa would have liked you," he said, then went inside, leaving James to ponder the strange paths life sometimes took. The Petrovs' retreat proved temporary. 2 weeks later, Elena was served with papers, not for custody this time, but for access rights as grandparents. It was a softer approach but with the same end goal, getting access to Alexander and, by extension, the fortune he would one day control. "They won't stop," Elena said, pacing James's living room. "They will keep coming with different tactics until they find one that works." James watched her, an idea forming. "What if we disappeared?" he suggested. "Not running away exactly, but a fresh start somewhere they wouldn't think to look." Elena stopped pacing. "You would leave your home? For us?" James looked around at the house he had shared with Sarah, where they had brought Lily home as a newborn, where he had grieved and healed and learned to live again. "This is just a building," he said. "Home is the people in it." The decision wasn't easy, but it felt right. James had a former client in Seattle who had been trying to recruit him to help establish a custom furniture business. The city was large enough to get lost in but close enough that Lily wouldn't feel completely uprooted. Elena's tech skills would be more marketable there, and they could use a small portion of Alexander's trust fund, accessed through legal channels Sam helped establish, to set up their new life.